In the heart of a secluded mountain town, nestled among towering pines and misty valleys, stood the renowned Aurora Gallery, a venerable institution where art and history converged in a sanctuary of creativity. Generations of residents and visitors had marveled at its eclectic collection of paintings, sculptures, and rare artifacts, each piece a testament to the passage of time and the enduring spirit of the community. The gallery, with its arched windows, polished hardwood floors, and subdued lighting, was more than just a museum. It was a living repository of the town's soul, a place where the past whispered to the present and dreams were carefully curated like priceless masterpieces. On an unusually chilly October evening, when a soft fog had begun to creep along the winding roads and the last rays of sunlight bathed the gallery in a gentle otherworldly glow, an event occurred that would unravel the fabric of that cherished sanctuary. As closing time neared and the gallery's halls gradually emptied of its daytime visitors, a quiet tension seemed to hang in the air, a sense that something was not quite right. Behind a locked door leading to the gallery's private collection, where priceless artifacts and seldom displayed works were kept under meticulous guard, a janitor named Edwin Park was making his final rounds. Edwin, a reserved man in his late 50s with a lifetime of service to the gallery, had always prided himself on his unwavering dedication. That evening, however, his routine took a dark and irreversible turn. As Edwin swept the polished floors near the storeroom, his eyes caught sight of a motionless form lying in a shadowed corner. His heart sank as he realized that it was not one of the overnight staff, but a visitor, an esteemed local art historian named Malcolm Reyes, whose passion for uncovering hidden stories had made him a familiar figure at the gallery. Malcolm lay slumped against a display case, his once bright eyes now vacant and unseeing. A delicate trail of dried blood traced from his temple to the cold floor, and clutched in his hand was a crumpled piece of paper. The hastily scrawled message, nearly illegible in the dim light, read simply, "Some secrets shatter silence." Edwin's trembling hands fumbled for his mobile phone as he dialed the emergency number. His call, laced with shock and disbelief, reverberated down the empty corridor. Within minutes, the gallery was swarmed by uniformed officers and forensic experts, transforming the quiet, hallowed halls into a grim tableau of tragedy. The discovery sent shockwaves throughout the small town, where Malcolm's expertise and gentle spirit had long inspired both art lovers and skeptics alike. Detective Tessa Morgan, a dedicated investigator with the Regional Police Department, known for her meticulous attention to detail and calm resolve under pressure, arrived on the scene as dawn broke over the mountain peaks. In the silent corridor of the private collection, the harsh light of a portable lamp illuminated every detail: the careful placement of Malcolm's body, the faint smear of blood on the polished tile, and the torn scrap of paper that carried a message as enigmatic as it was chilling. Tessa's experienced eyes took in the scene, noting that there were no signs of a frantic struggle. The room was arranged with a precision that suggested the act had been committed deliberately, and the note hinted at a motive deeper than mere random violence. In the hours that followed, Detective Morgan began her investigation by interviewing the few individuals who had remained in the gallery after closing. Claudia Winters, the night curator known for her quiet efficiency and encyclopedic knowledge of the collection, recalled that Malcolm had been unusually intense in recent weeks. He'd been spending long hours in the archives, Claudia explained softly, wringing her hands. He talked about uncovering hidden layers in our collection, details in the provenance of certain pieces that didn't add up. He believed that our history was being rewritten, that someone was trying to erase parts of our heritage. I thought he was simply passionate, but now, I worry he might have seen something dangerous. Other staff members remembered that Malcolm had been seen speaking on his cell phone in hushed tones near the old storeroom, a place few visitors ever saw. A security guard, who preferred not to be named, mentioned that he had once overheard Malcolm say, "The truth is hidden in plain sight, but only if you know where to look." His words, now echoing ominously in Tessa's mind, suggested that the historian had been on the verge of exposing a secret that someone somewhere was desperate to keep buried. Determined to uncover the truth behind Malcolm Reyes's death, Detective Morgan requested access to his personal belongings. With the cooperation of his distraught family, officers searched his small book-lined apartment in an old stone building near the town center. Amid stacks of dusty manuscripts, faded photographs, and carefully preserved letters, They found his leather journal, a worn spiral-bound notebook that chronicled his relentless quest for historical accuracy. The pages were filled with detailed entries, sketches of artifacts, and notes on property deeds and museum records. Early entries were filled with admiration for the beauty of art and the integrity of historical documentation. However, as the journal progressed, the tone shifted. Malcolm began to note peculiarities in the documentation of several prominent works in the gallery's collection. The signatures on these paintings differ from the originals. He had written in one entry, "Some records have been altered, as if someone wanted to hide their true origins." In another entry, he noted, "There is a deliberate erasure happening in our archives. I fear that if I expose it, they will silence me forever." The urgency in his handwriting was palpable, a silent cry for justice from a man who had uncovered a web of deceit that threatened the very foundation of the town's cultural legacy. Digital forensic experts later recovered fragments of deleted emails from Malcolm's university-issued laptop. Among these were messages exchanged with an unknown correspondent who signed off as Vanguard. In one particularly alarming email, the text warned, "If you continue to pursue these discrepancies, you will face irreversible consequences." Although the messages were heavily encrypted and the sender's identity remained shrouded in mystery, the threat resonated with a cold finality that sent chills down Detective Morgan's spine. It was clear that Malcolm's investigation had disturbed someone powerful, someone who was willing to resort to extreme measures to protect their interests. As the investigation deepened, Detective Morgan began to connect the clues. Public records and archival documents, obtained from the town's historical society, revealed that several artifacts in the Aurora Gallery's collection had questionable provenance. In particular, a set of rare paintings, said to be masterpieces from a renowned but controversial artist of the early 20th century, had documentation that appeared to have been altered. The original deeds, recorded decades ago, had been amended in a series of small, almost imperceptible changes, details that Malcolm had meticulously noted in his journal. These adjustments, while seemingly minor on their own, added up over time to a systematic rewriting of history, one that would have allowed a powerful family to consolidate wealth and influence by controlling the narrative of art ownership. Detective Morgan's inquiries eventually led her to focus on the gallery's management. She arranged interviews with the director, a sharp yet guarded woman named Priscilla Hart, and several senior staff members. Priscilla, known for her professional demeanor and dedication to preserving the gallery's reputation, expressed shock at the unfolding events. "Malcolm was a trusted historian who dedicated his life to preserving our past," she said, voice tight with emotion. "I never imagined that his pursuit of historical accuracy would lead to something so tragic. We take every precaution to ensure our records are accurate, but now I wonder if there were changes made behind closed doors that no one was meant to see." Her words, though measured, hinted at a possible internal conflict, one where the pressure to maintain a flawless legacy might have driven some to manipulate the truth. Further complicating the investigation were whispers of an influential local family, the Kincaids, whose philanthropic contributions to the town had long earned them a revered status. Yet rumors persisted that the Kincaids had over the years quietly acquired significant portions of the town's cultural heritage through means that were never fully transparent. Detective Morgan uncovered that several of the altered records in the gallery's collection were tied to properties and artworks that had once belonged to the Kincaid estate. In old newspaper clippings and archival documents, the Kincaids were praised as benefactors of the community, but a few older residents recalled murmurs of scandal, tales of secret deals, and quietly enforced silence. One elderly man, who had worked in the town's records office for over 40 years, confided that he had seen evidence of irregular transactions in old property deeds that, when compared with the originals, showed signs of deliberate alteration. His testimony, combined with Malcolm's journal, painted a picture of a long-standing effort to control the narrative of the town's history. Digital forensics continued to reveal new layers of the mystery. The recovered emails between Malcolm and Vanguard were further analyzed, and investigators discovered that the communications had become increasingly urgent in the days leading up to his death. In one reconstructed conversation, Vanguard cautioned, "The past is a dangerous place for those who disturb it. Cease your inquiries or face the ultimate silence." The unmistakable threat, repeated in several fragments, underscored the high stakes of Malcolm's investigation. It was not simply a matter of academic curiosity, it was a confrontation with forces that wielded power over the very essence of the town's cultural identity. With mounting evidence, Detective Morgan coordinated a series of discreet raids on offices and storage facilities associated with the Aurora Gallery and the local historical society. In one long-forgotten filing room in the town's government building, federal agents uncovered a cache of original property deeds and correspondence between city officials and representatives of the Kincaid family. The documents revealed that over the course of several decades, key records had been revised, names omitted, sale prices adjusted, in a manner that favored the interests of the Kincaids. The ledger entries and memos provided a direct link to the inconsistencies noted by Malcolm, confirming that his suspicions were not unfounded. As the investigation neared its climax, Detective Morgan compiled her findings into an exhaustive report that detailed every facet of the case, a mosaic of handwritten journal entries, decrypted emails, redacted documents, and eyewitness testimonies that together formed a damning narrative of historical manipulation. The dossier, spanning hundreds of pages, was presented to the district attorney in a series of confidential briefings. The evidence was overwhelming. It traced a deliberate, decades-long effort to rewrite the town's cultural history, linking the altered records directly to the influential Kincaid family and implicating a network of officials who had conspired to suppress inconvenient truths. It was clear that Malcolm Reyes had not merely been investigating a series of archival discrepancies, he had been on the verge of exposing a cover-up that would have upended the very foundations of Westridge's identity. The grand jury, convened in a modest county courthouse, where the echoes of history mingled with the urgency of modern justice, examined the extensive evidence with a keen eye. Expert witnesses testified about the technical methods used to alter historical records, the digital reconstruction of deleted emails, and the cumulative impact of the revised property deeds. Their testimony was interlaced with poignant accounts from longtime residents and former public officials, all of whom recounted a history of secrecy and a pervasive culture of silence. In a decision that resonated with the gravity of the uncovered truth, the grand jury returned indictments on multiple charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, directly linking the historical cover-up to the death of Caroline Everett. The subsequent trial captivated the entire community. In a crowded courtroom filled with families, students, and local historians, federal prosecutors presented their case with painstaking detail. Expert digital forensic analysts demonstrated how the reconstructed emails and text messages provided irrefutable evidence of the anonymous warnings, while forensic accountants used detailed charts and graphs to illustrate the systematic discrepancies in the archival records. A well-respected local historian took the stand to compare original property deeds with the altered documents, his voice steady as he revealed the staggering extent of the revisions. Each piece of evidence, from the faded ink on a torn scrap of paper to the meticulous annotations in Caroline's journal, was woven together into a narrative that left little room for doubt. The cover-up was a deliberate, calculated operation that spanned generations, and those who sought to challenge the official record had paid a heavy price. Detective Morgan herself testified, her voice resolute as she recounted the fateful discovery on that foggy autumn morning. She detailed every aspect of the crime scene, the precise position of Caroline's body, the seemingly ordered chaos of the storage room, and the chilling note that had been her only clue. Her testimony was both a tribute to Caroline's unwavering dedication to uncovering the truth and a damning indictment of the powerful interests that had conspired to bury it. As she spoke, the courtroom fell into a reflective silence, each witness and juror absorbing the implications of a conspiracy that had manipulated history for decades. Though several mid-level administrators and clerks were convicted and sentenced to significant prison terms, the trial's conclusion did not fully satisfy the community's demand for justice. The most influential figures behind the alterations, those whose signatures had been redacted and whose names were whispered about in hushed tones, managed to escape complete prosecution by exploiting legal technicalities and the enduring power of their legacies. For many, the verdict was a bittersweet victory, a reminder that while the truth had been partially exposed, the full extent of the corruption remained hidden beneath layers of secrecy. In the aftermath of the trial, Westridge itself began a slow, transformative process. The community, once divided by unspoken grudges and guarded histories, united in a renewed commitment to transparency. Town hall meetings were held, and public forums convened, where citizens debated the ethics of historical record-keeping and the responsibility of those in power to honor the truth. Local government officials introduced new measures to ensure that future property transactions were subject to independent audits, and a special committee was formed to oversee the preservation of the town's cultural heritage. The long tarnished records were re-examined and restored, and independent scholars were invited to verify the authenticity of historical documents that had once been manipulated for personal gain. Independent journalists and documentary filmmakers seized upon the case, producing in-depth reports and feature films that chronicled the saga of Caroline Everett and the decades-long cover-up. Academic conferences and university seminars explored the implications of the case for public ethics, historical revisionism, and the role of whistleblowers in safeguarding collective memory. The story of a dedicated educator who had sacrificed her life in the relentless pursuit of truth became a rallying cry for a new generation, one that vowed to challenge established narratives and to demand that every hidden secret be brought into the light. Detective Morgan, whose career had been indelibly shaped by the investigation, continued her work with a sense of solemn purpose. In the quiet moments of early morning, as the fog lifted from the streets of Westridge and the town began to stir with the promise of a new day, she would revisit the recovered files in her modest office. The worn pages of Caroline's journal, the meticulously reconstructed emails, and the precise ledger entries served as constant reminders of the price of truth and the enduring resilience of those who dared to question authority. Every time she encountered a new anomaly or received an anonymous tip, she recalled the lessons of the case, a reminder that every uncovered discrepancy, no matter how small, could be the key to dismantling a network of corruption. Years later, as the restored records of Westridge shone brightly in the town archives and public trust in local institutions began to rebuild, the legacy of Caroline Everett's sacrifice remained a touchstone for reform. A memorial plaque, etched in elegant script, was installed in the renovated wing of Westridge High School, a symbol of the enduring commitment to uncovering the truth. Her story was taught in classrooms, discussed at community meetings, and revered by those who understood that transparency was the bedrock of a just society. The case of Caroline Everett, and the conspiracy that had altered the town's history, became more than just a legal proceeding. It was a transformative moment for Westridge. It served as a stark reminder that the past, no matter how long concealed, always has a way of emerging when faced with unwavering inquiry. For the citizens of the town, every new effort to safeguard public records, every independent audit of property transactions, and every public forum on ethical governance was a tribute to a brave soul who had paid the ultimate price for her convictions. In the tapestry of Westridge's history, the threads of that tragic autumn are woven together with stories of resilience, reform, and an unyielding commitment to truth. Public art installations, commemorative lectures, and community initiatives ensured that Caroline Everett's legacy would endure as a beacon for accountability and transparency. In every whispered conversation about the integrity of public records, in every determined public meeting, and in every new policy enacted to protect historical truth, her memory was invoked as a guiding light, reminding everyone that even when those in power seek to rewrite the past, the voice of truth, no matter how soft, will always find a way to be heard. For Detective Tessa Morgan, whose name became synonymous with the relentless pursuit of justice in Westridge, the case was a defining chapter in her career. Each investigation that followed carried echoes of that long, hard-fought battle against corruption, and every time she encountered a small irregularity, she remembered the brave educator who had risked everything to unearth the hidden stories of her town. With each new lead and every uncovered document, Tessa reaffirmed her belief that the pursuit of truth was not a path without peril, but one that ultimately fortified the bonds of community and restored faith in the institutions that governed their lives. And so, as the golden light of sunrise touched the hills surrounding Westridge and the town began its daily routine with a newfound sense of purpose, the legacy of that fateful autumn lived on. In every carefully preserved record, every spirited public debate, and every determined effort to ensure that history is not rewritten for the benefit of a select few, the sacrifice of Caroline Everett and the hard-won truths uncovered during that dark chapter continued to serve as a potent reminder. The truth, however deeply concealed, is a treasure that must be guarded, celebrated, and relentlessly pursued for the sake of all. The small coastal community of Harbor Point had always prided itself on its weathered docks, briny air, and traditions handed down through generations of fishermen and seafarers. Every morning, as the sun broke over the endless blue horizon, sturdy vessels set out to sea, and the town stirred with quiet determination. Life here was measured in the rhythmic crash of waves and the creak of old wooden piers, a way of living that had remained almost unchanged for decades. Yet on one cool autumn morning, everything changed. It began as a routine dawn. Local residents gathered at the harbor to watch the boats depart, their voices soft against the early light. Among them was Captain Desmond Clark, a respected mariner whose deep knowledge of the sea and generous spirit had long made him a pillar of the community. Desmond was known for his steady hand, his encyclopedic stories about the coast, and his mentorship of young fishermen eager to learn the ways of the water. But on that fateful day, as fog still clung to the water and gulls cried overhead, a call from the harbor master sent shockwaves through Harbor Point. A body had been discovered washed up near the old boathouse. It was Desmond Clark. Local emergency services rushed to the scene. Uniformed officers and paramedics arrived on the rocky shore, where the tide had receded to reveal Desmond's battered figure lying face down on the wet sand. His weathered features, once so full of life and laughter, were now frozen in a haunting mask of shock and resignation. Near his outstretched hand, partially covered by a piece of tattered cloth, lay a scrap of paper bearing a single chilling sentence: "Some truths are best left beneath the surface." News of the tragedy spread like wildfire. For the people of Harbor Point, the loss of Captain Clark was not just the disappearance of a cherished elder, it was a blow to their identity. Soon the investigation was handed over to Detective Lillian Wu, a methodical and perceptive officer with the state police known for her ability to find order in chaos. Lillian arrived at the scene as the low tide continued to expose evidence that the ocean had left behind. She crouched near the body, her eyes scanning every detail, the way the paper was clutched tightly, the subtle imprint of footprints in the sand, and the strange pattern of bruising on Desmond's hands, as though he had grasped something desperately in his final moments. Within hours, Harbor Point was abuzz with rumors. Neighbors whispered in the narrow streets about what could have driven the good captain to such a fate. Was it a robbery gone wrong, a personal vendetta, or something far more insidious, a cover-up of secrets that someone had fought to keep hidden? Over the next few days, Detective Wu set about reconstructing the captain's final hours. Interviews with local fishermen, dock workers, and residents revealed that Desmond had been acting uncharacteristically secretive in the weeks before his death. Jeremiah Cole, an old salt and lifelong friend of the captain, recalled a conversation he had shared with Desmond one late afternoon. "He told me he'd noticed odd discrepancies in the old shipping logs," Jeremiah said, his gruff voice heavy with sorrow. "He mentioned that certain cargo manifests didn't match up with the records on file. I thought he was just overthinking things, until I heard he was digging through decades-old documents in the town archives." Jeremiah's words painted a picture of a man determined to uncover a hidden truth, one that might expose corruption in a system built on old loyalties and buried rivalries. At Desmond's modest cottage near the edge of town, officers carefully combed through his belongings. The space was filled with maritime maps, faded photographs of stormy seas, and numerous journals documenting his life on the water. One weathered leather-bound notebook, its pages frayed at the edges, caught Detective W's attention. As she leafed through its contents, she discovered detailed entries describing anomalies in cargo deliveries, unexpected deviations in shipping routes, and cryptic notes referencing the ledger and accounts that never add up. One entry, dated just a week before his death, read, "There's a discrepancy in the log again. If the records don't match, it means someone is diverting shipments. I must follow the trail, even if it leads to dangerous waters." The urgency and determination in Desmond's script made it clear that he had stumbled upon a secret that could disrupt the very fabric of Harbor Point's maritime trade. Digital forensic experts managed to retrieve deleted messages from Desmond's old laptop, a relic he'd used sparingly but cherished for its ability to store his research. Among the recovered files were fragmented emails exchanged with a mysterious correspondent known only as Mariner. In one partial message, the text warned, "Cease your search, or you'll be pulled under." The unyielding tone of the threat was unmistakable. Desmond's inquiry had clearly provoked a reaction from someone with both the means and the motive to ensure that the truth remained submerged. As Detective Wu pieced together the evidence, she began to focus on the historical shipping records of Harbor Point. The town had long been a hub for coastal trade, with records dating back to the early 20th century meticulously maintained by a local cooperative. However, inconsistencies soon emerged. Several shipping manifests, when compared with original ledgers stored in the county archives, showed small but consistent discrepancies, missing entries, altered cargo descriptions, and inexplicable transfers of goods to unlisted entities. These anomalies, though subtle, added up to a systematic pattern that suggested deliberate manipulation. Investigators learned that a powerful local shipping company, Starline Maritime, had grown rapidly over the past decade by acquiring smaller operators. Publicly, Starline was hailed as an engine of progress, revitalizing Harbor Point's economy and creating jobs. Privately, however, evidence began to suggest that the company had used aggressive tactics to secure contracts, and that some of those tactics might have involved falsifying records. Detective WE's research uncovered that several shipments, particularly those involving high-value goods such as rare spices, premium fabrics, and even contraband electronics, had been diverted under dubious circumstances. Although Desmond had not been directly involved with the management of Starline Maritime, his journals indicated that he had noticed irregularities in the cargo delivered to the harbor, discrepancies that pointed toward an organized effort to skim profits from legitimate trade. One afternoon, Detective Wu met with Dr. Isabel Romero, a professor of maritime history at a nearby college and an expert on Harbor Point's shipping legacy. In the quiet ambiance of her cluttered office, surrounded by antique navigational instruments and towering stacks of historical volumes, Dr. Romero explained that the town's shipping records had always contained hints of irregularities, anomalies that were dismissed as clerical errors until recent audits suggested otherwise. For years I've been aware that certain transactions didn't quite fit the official narrative, Dr. Romero said softly. But it wasn't until Captain Clark's notes came to light that I began to suspect that there was a deliberate cover-up. The records were altered in a manner that would benefit certain corporate interests, and if you dig deep enough, the discrepancies tell a story of betrayal and greed. Her words resonated with the mounting evidence, reinforcing the notion that Desmond's investigation had threatened to expose a long-standing scheme. As the investigation intensified, Detective Wu received anonymous tips from within the harbor's tight-knit community. One tip, delivered as a hastily scrawled note on scrap paper, read, "Don't let the ledger speak. Some accounts are best left unsettled." The note, its ink smudged by the sea breeze, hinted that those behind the cover-up were aware of Desmond's inquiries and were determined to silence him before he could reveal the full extent of the manipulation. Federal agents were eventually brought in to help scrutinize the digital evidence and the historical records. Using advanced techniques, they reconstructed a nearly complete timeline of the discrepancies in shipping manifests over the past 5 years. The data revealed that on nearly every occasion when high-value cargo was scheduled to arrive, there was a small but deliberate shortfall in the records, an amount that, when aggregated, represented a significant diversion of funds. These funds, it appeared, were being funneled into a series of offshore accounts controlled by an entity with ties to Starline Maritime. Although the precise identity of the orchestrator remained elusive, the digital trail was undeniable. Detective Wu began to narrow her focus on a handful of suspects within Starline Maritime's upper management. One individual, a sharply dressed executive named Calvin Briggs, whose name had surfaced only recently in internal memos, emerged as a person of interest. Calvin had been praised for his innovative approach to modernizing the company, yet some former employees hinted that he was a man who would stop at nothing to ensure that Starline's profits remained robust. When questioned by federal agents, Calvin offered a polished account of routine corporate restructuring. "We simply optimized our operations to meet market demands," he explained, his tone measured and confident, yet inconsistencies in his story and the trace evidence linking him to several of the altered shipping records left investigators with a growing sense of suspicion. In a breakthrough moment, digital forensic experts discovered that the anonymous messages exchanged with Mariner and Oracle could be partially linked to a secure server located in a nondescript office building near the harbor. With the assistance of federal cyber specialists, they traced one of the IP addresses to an account registered to a private consultant known as Edwin Carver, a name that had never before been mentioned in relation to Harbor Point's shipping records. Carver, a reclusive figure with a background in maritime logistics and a reputation for working behind the scenes, was known to have consulted for several major shipping companies. When pressed for information, he denied any involvement, insisting that his work was purely technical. However, his evasive answers and the digital breadcrumbs left in the recovered emails suggested otherwise. It appeared that Carver might have been acting as an intermediary, facilitating the transfer of funds in exchange for a cut of the diverted revenue. As the layers of evidence accumulated, Detective Wu compiled an extensive report that detailed every aspect of the investigation, a dossier that spanned handwritten notes from Desmond's journal, reconstructed emails, forensic analyses of shipping records, and testimonies from dozens of witnesses. The report was submitted to the district attorney, who, recognizing the potential national implications of the case, convened a grand jury to review the evidence. In a series of tense sessions held in a modest county courthouse, the grand jury was presented with the full scope of the cover-up, a narrative that stretched from Harbor Point's busy docks to the dark corridors of corporate power. Expert witnesses testified about the precise adjustments made to shipping manifests, the digital reconstruction of deleted messages, and the subtle yet systematic nature of the discrepancies. Their testimony revealed a chilling pattern. Every altered record was part of a deliberate effort to siphon funds from legitimate trade and funnel them into the hands of those with the power to rewrite history. Ultimately, the grand jury returned indictments on multiple charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, charges that directly linked the cover-up to the death of Captain Desmond Clark. The indictments named several mid-level administrators and technical operatives within Starline Maritime, as well as Edwin Carver, whose role as a financial intermediary was now firmly established. While some of the top executives managed to evade the harshest penalties by exploiting legal technicalities and the protective barriers of corporate structure, the indictments marked a significant victory for the investigators and the community of Harbor Point. The trial that followed was a prolonged legal battle that captivated both the local community and maritime industry insiders. In a packed courtroom, where families of local fishermen, independent auditors, and community activists gathered with heavy hearts, federal prosecutors presented their case with painstaking clarity. Digital forensic analysts demonstrated how the recovered emails and shipping logs revealed a deliberate manipulation of records, while forensic accountants used detailed graphs to illustrate how the small discrepancies, when aggregated over time, amounted to a substantial misappropriation of funds. Expert witnesses in maritime history compared original cargo manifests with the altered documents, showing that the changes had been carefully designed to conceal illicit transfers. The narrative that emerged was both technical and deeply human, a tale of a dedicated captain who had risked everything to protect his community, and of a powerful network willing to silence the truth at any cost. Detective Lillian Wu took the stand, her voice steady and resolute as she recounted the sequence of events that led to the discovery of Captain Clark's body. She described in meticulous detail the evidence found on the shore, the pattern of footprints that indicated a struggle, the placement of the note that now served as a grim epitaph, and the digital trails that connected the anomalies in the shipping records to specific transactions. Her testimony, delivered with a blend of professional rigor and heartfelt sorrow, painted a picture of a man who had given his life to challenge a corrupt system and of an investigation that had uncovered a conspiracy spanning decades. Every word resonated with the determination to bring justice to a community that had long trusted the integrity of its maritime trade. Though the trial resulted in the conviction of several mid-level operatives and technical staff on charges of fraud and conspiracy, sentences that included lengthy prison terms, the outcome left a bittersweet legacy. The top echelons of the conspiracy, including key figures within Starline Maritime and the elusive Edwin Carver, managed to skirt full accountability by leveraging complex legal defenses and the protective veils of institutional power. Their names were redacted from many of the public documents, and the shadow of their influence lingered in the unresolved details of the case. For many in Harbor Point, the verdict was a partial victory, a reminder that while the system had managed to hold some individuals accountable, the full truth had not yet been unearthed. In the months following the trial, Harbor Point itself began a gradual process of healing. The community, shaken by the revelations and the loss of a beloved captain, rallied together in a series of public forums and town hall meetings. Residents demanded that local authorities implement stricter oversight of shipping practices and that public records be made accessible for independent review. The local government introduced new regulations to ensure that every cargo manifest and every financial transaction was subject to rigorous audit, and a coalition of community activists formed to safeguard the town's historical records from future manipulation. Independent journalists and maritime scholars also took an active interest in the case. A series of in-depth reports and documentaries chronicled the investigation, from the fateful discovery on the shore to the intricate digital reconstructions of deleted emails. University seminars featured the case as a poignant example of how corruption could infiltrate even the most time-honored institutions, and public debates erupted about the ethical responsibilities of corporations that managed essential community resources. The story of Captain Desmond Clark, though tragic, became a rallying cry for transparency and accountability, a testament to the idea that no one should be allowed to silence the truth, no matter how deeply it is buried. Detective Wu continued her work with an unwavering commitment. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the tides receded and the remnants of the night's evidence lay bare on the wet sand, she would review the digital logs and physical evidence, each piece a reminder of the immense cost of challenging entrenched power. Every new case that followed was approached with the same meticulous care and determination, driven by the belief that even the smallest anomaly might reveal a larger truth. Over the years, the case of Harbor Point became interwoven with the town's identity, a chapter of its history marked by both tragedy and the triumph of truth. Memorials were erected at the local marina in honor of Captain Clark, and annual ceremonies celebrated his life and dedication. The shipping records, once altered and hidden away, were restored and made available for public scrutiny, symbolizing the community's renewed commitment to transparency. Educational programs and workshops were organized, teaching the younger generation about the importance of integrity in both business and public service, and inspiring many to pursue careers in forensic accounting and digital investigation. For Detective Lillian Wu, the legacy of the case remained a personal beacon, a reminder that the pursuit of truth, though fraught with danger and loss, was the only way to ensure justice for those who had been wronged. Her name became synonymous with a relentless commitment to uncovering hidden details, and her careful methods influenced a new generation of investigators in Harbor Point and beyond. Each day, as she patrolled the rugged coastline and worked on fresh cases, she carried with her the memory of Captain Clark's steadfast spirit, a legacy that would continue to shape the town's future. In a final, reflective moment many years later, Detective Wu stood at the edge of the harbor at sunrise, watching as the first light of day broke over the tranquil water. The cool breeze carried with it the distant calls of seabirds and the gentle lapping of waves against the dock, a timeless rhythm that had witnessed both joy and sorrow in Harbor Point. In that quiet moment, she allowed herself a brief pause to remember the case that had forever altered her life and the lives of so many in the community. She thought of the painstaking work, the whispers of threats, the digital traces that had slowly revealed the hidden network, and the cost of a captain's final valiant stand for truth. The legacy of the investigation was not measured solely in the convictions or the reforms that followed, but in the collective resolve of a community that refused to be complicit in silence. It was a legacy built on the courage of those who dared to question the official narrative, and on the tireless efforts of investigators who believed that every hidden detail deserved to be brought into the light. In Harbor Point, where the land met the endless sea and every tide told a story, the truth had finally begun to resurface, illuminating even the darkest corners of a once secret network. And so, as the sun ascended over the shimmering water and life resumed its steady cadence along the docks, the story of Harbor Point endured, a tale of resilience, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of justice that echoed through every whispered conversation, every restored record, and every new inquiry into the hidden workings of power. It was a story that would be told for generations, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming forces, the quest for truth is a journey that, step by step, transforms a community and preserves the integrity of its shared history. In the remote high country where ancient pines sway above crystal-clear waters, Silver Lake Lodge had long been a cherished retreat. Built in the early 20th century and renovated over decades, the lodge combined rustic charm with modern comforts, offering a serene escape for those seeking solace in nature's embrace. Nestled on the lake's edge, its weathered wooden decks and stone chimneys bore silent witness to countless summer gatherings, quiet winter retreats, and whispered secrets shared beneath starlit skies. For many locals and out-of-towners alike, Silver Lake Lodge was more than a place to rest. It was a sanctuary of memories and community spirit. But on one fateful autumn weekend, the tranquil rhythm of the lodge was shattered by a crime that would send ripples through the entire region. Elliot Moore, a respected archivist and historian with a passion for uncovering hidden local lore, had spent years poring over old documents in the lodge's small in-house library. Known for his methodical nature and quiet determination, Elliot was fascinated by the legends surrounding Silver Lake, rumors of forgotten tragedies, whispered curses, and secret deals that had helped shape the town's destiny. In recent months, his research had taken a darker turn. He had begun to notice perplexing inconsistencies in the archival records, documents that appeared to have been altered, faded ink that didn't match original typewritten print, and sudden gaps in the history of land transfers involving the lodge and its surrounding properties. Convinced that someone was purposefully rewriting the past, Elliot had been documenting his findings in a battered leather journal, his handwriting growing more urgent with each passing day. On the chilly afternoon of October 18th, as a pale sun dipped behind the distant ridges, Elliot made his routine visit to the lodge's private archives. The building was quiet. Staff had already closed up the public areas, and only a few dedicated employees remained to secure the premises. In the secluded reading room lined with aged books and delicate manuscripts, Elliot settled into a creaking armchair. He spread out a series of faded maps and ancient deeds on a scarred oak table and began cross-referencing records. Hours passed in near silence, punctuated only by the soft scratch of his pen and the occasional creak of the old building. Later that evening, as a biting wind swept across the lake and dark clouds gathered overhead, a frantic phone call shattered the stillness. A junior librarian, Miranda Holt, who had been assisting Elliot earlier that day, reported that the reading room door had been found ajar by a night watchman. Rushing to the scene, Miranda and another staff member discovered something that would haunt them forever. Elliot Moore's body was slumped over the table, his lifeless eyes staring blankly at the scattered documents, and his journal clutched tightly in his grasp. A single scrap of paper, smeared with what appeared to be a mixture of ink and blood, lay on the floor. The hastily scrawled message read, "Some truths should remain undisturbed." The discovery sent shockwaves through Silver Lake. Within the hour, local law enforcement arrived, and the once familiar sanctuary was transformed into a crime scene. Uniformed officers carefully taped off the reading room, and forensic specialists began documenting every detail. The precise angle at which Elliot's body had fallen, the pattern of footprints leading to the door, and the subtle smear of blood on the polished oak table. Amidst the controlled chaos, Detective Natalie Reyes, a determined investigator with a reputation for thoroughness and a keen sense for the unusual, took charge of the case. Detective Reyes stood silently amid the rows of ancient tomes and fragile manuscripts, her experienced eyes taking in every nuance of the scene. There was no sign of a violent struggle, no chaotic disorder, only the unnerving stillness of a man whose final moments had been marked by quiet desperation. The note in his hand, its message both cryptic and foreboding, hinted at a motive that was as much about protecting hidden history as it was about personal retribution. Reyes suspected that Elliot's death was no random act of violence but a deliberate attempt to silence a man who had uncovered dangerous secrets. Over the next several days, Detective Reyes conducted a series of interviews with the few staff members and long-time residents connected to Silver Lake Lodge. Miranda Holt, visibly shaken and still haunted by the memory of that grim discovery, recalled Elliot's recent behavior with a tremor in her voice. "He was so passionate about the lodge's past," she said softly. "He believed that the official records were hiding something that someone didn't want us to know. In our last conversation, he mentioned that the documents showed irregularities in the way land was transferred, and he said he was close to finding the key piece of evidence. I never imagined it would cost him his life." Another employee, Thomas Gray, a caretaker with decades of service to the lodge, remembered that Elliot had been seen arguing with an unknown visitor in the archival room a few weeks prior. "I caught a glimpse of a man in a dark coat," Thomas recalled. They exchanged a few words, and Elliot looked agitated, as if he'd been warned off from digging any deeper. Though details were scant, Thomas's recollection added a new layer of suspicion. Eager to understand the significance of Elliot's research, Detective Reyes requested permission to review his personal journal. With the reluctant cooperation of his grieving family, the journal was examined. Its pages revealed an intense dedication to uncovering the lodge's obscured past. Elliot had written about the alleged manipulation of records dating back to the lodge's early years, a time when powerful local families had quietly orchestrated property transfers and concealed the true origins of several treasured artifacts. One entry in particular caught Reyes's attention. The ledger of land deals reveals a pattern, a line of transactions that defies logic. "I fear that if I trace this chain back, I will uncover a secret that those in power will kill to protect." The weight of these words confirmed that Elliot had been on the brink of exposing a scandal that reached far beyond the confines of the gallery-like archives. Digital forensic experts managed to recover deleted emails and text messages from Elliot's university-provided laptop. Among the recovered fragments were exchanges with a correspondent who signed only as Icarus. One partial email warned, "Cease your inquiry, or you will be silenced." The message was devoid of personal warmth and bristled with an undercurrent of threat. Although the identity behind Icarus remained obscured by layers of encryption, the digital evidence bolstered Detective Reyes's growing conviction. Someone with considerable influence had been monitoring Elliot's progress and had determined that his revelations could not be allowed to emerge. Detective Reyes expanded her investigation to include a thorough review of historical property records housed in the county archives. With the assistance of local archivist Dr. Miriam Holt, a bespectacled scholar with a passion for regional history, she meticulously compared original deeds with later revisions. What emerged was a disturbing pattern. Key documents, especially those related to the founding of Silver Lake Lodge and subsequent property transfers, had been altered. Signatures had been overwritten, dates shifted, and sale prices reduced in subtle yet significant ways. These adjustments, when aggregated over decades, appeared designed to erase evidence of controversial deals that had benefited a powerful local family known as the Whitmores. Publicly revered as community benefactors, the Whitmores were rumored to have accumulated their wealth through a series of covert transactions and hush-hush agreements. Elliot's notes had hinted at their involvement, and now the archival evidence suggested that the official history had been manipulated to protect their legacy. Determined to follow every lead, Detective Reyes arranged meetings with several longtime residents who had witnessed Harbor Point's evolution over the decades. One such resident, Eleanor Jacobs, a woman in her 70s who had grown up in the town, recounted with a tremor in her voice stories of the Whitmore family's mysterious influence. "They always seemed to have a hand in everything," Eleanor said, gazing off into a distant past. "I remember my father telling me that the Whitmores could make problems vanish, that if you got too inquisitive, you'd be quietly shown the door. I never understood it until now." Eleanor's recollections provided a human face to the manipulated records and underscored the deep roots of secrecy that had likely led to Elliot's demise. As the investigation advanced, digital forensic specialists uncovered more fragments of Elliot's correspondence with Icarus. The recovered messages grew increasingly urgent. In one reconstructed text, the sender warned, "Do not push further. Your inquiry threatens to unravel things that should remain buried." These threats, delivered in a cold, measured tone, lent an air of inevitability to the case. Someone powerful was prepared to take lethal measures to keep the past hidden. Faced with mounting evidence and a network of clues that spanned both digital and physical records, Detective Reyes expanded the scope of her inquiry to include the management of Silver Lake Lodge itself. In a series of discreet interviews with current administrators, she inquired about internal policies regarding the archival of historical documents and the handling of property records. The lodge's director, a composed yet evasive man named Leonard Quinn, acknowledged that the institution prided itself on preserving its legacy, but declined to comment on recent adjustments to records. "Our history is sacred," he said in measured tones, "and we take great care to maintain its integrity. Any revisions are part of routine administrative updates." His response, however, did little to dispel the mounting evidence that suggested a systematic effort to conceal inconvenient truths. In a pivotal breakthrough, forensic accountants working with the task force discovered that over the past 30 years, a series of small regular adjustments had been made to the property records of the lodge and surrounding lands. Although each individual change was minute, when combined they represented a staggering discrepancy, a reallocation of thousands of acres and significant sums of money. The accounts were routed through a series of shell companies, registered under obscure names, and the financial trails ultimately led to a private trust that, according to public records, was controlled by the Whitmore family. The ledger, once considered an archaic relic of a bygone era, now served as a damning record of deliberate historical manipulation. Armed with this comprehensive evidence, Detective Reyes compiled an exhaustive report, a dossier that spanned hundreds of pages and included handwritten entries from Elliot's journal, recovered digital communications, detailed comparisons of original and altered property records, and testimonies from community members who remembered the Whitmore's influence. The report was presented in a series of confidential briefings to the district attorney, who recognized that the case had far-reaching implications, not just for Harbor Point's history, but for the very notion of historical truth in the modern era. The district attorney promptly convened a grand jury to review the evidence. In tense sessions held within a modest county courthouse, the grand jury examined every piece of the puzzle. Expert witnesses testified about the sophisticated methods used to alter historical records, the subtle discrepancies that had been overlooked for decades, and the chilling digital communications that had warned against further inquiry. Their collective testimony painted a picture of a network so deeply entrenched that it spanned generations, a deliberate cover-up that had been designed to protect a powerful legacy at the expense of transparency and truth. In a decision that resonated with the gravity of the uncovered secrets, the grand jury returned indictments on multiple charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, directly linking the historical cover-up to the murder of Caroline Everett. The trial that followed was one of the most emotionally charged legal proceedings in the region. In a packed courtroom filled with local residents, scholars, and impassioned community activists, federal prosecutors presented their case with painstaking detail. Digital forensic analysts demonstrated how the reconstructed emails and text messages formed an unbroken chain of evidence linking Icarus to the suppression of historical records. Forensic accountants used detailed charts and graphs to show how minute discrepancies, when aggregated over time, amounted to a significant reallocation of assets that had benefited the Whitmore family. Local historians provided a moving account of the town's transformation under a manipulated narrative, stories of families displaced and legacies erased. Every detail, from the faded ink on a torn scrap of paper to the precise margins in original deeds, was woven into a narrative that made it impossible to deny the calculated nature of the cover-up. Detective Reyes took the stand, her testimony a blend of professional precision and personal resolve. She recounted in vivid detail the discovery of Caroline's body in the reading room of Silver Lake Lodge, the painstaking process of recovering Elliot Moore's journal, and the overwhelming digital trails that pointed to the network of corruption. With every word, she underscored the heavy cost of uncovering the truth, a truth that had been silenced by those who wielded power without accountability. Her voice, though steady, carried the weight of loss and determination, and as she finished her testimony, the courtroom sat in a profound silence, each witness and juror acutely aware of the historical significance of what had been revealed. Though several mid-level administrators and technical staff were convicted on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, the trial's conclusion left many questions unanswered. The highest-ranking figures involved in the cover-up managed to avoid the most severe penalties by exploiting legal technicalities and the protective barriers of their long-standing influence. Their names were redacted from public records, leaving a haunting void, a reminder that while some threads of the conspiracy had been unraveled, others remained hidden beneath layers of secrecy and power. For many in Harbor Point, the verdict was a bittersweet victory. A measure of justice had been served, but the full extent of the historical manipulation remained shrouded in ambiguity. In the months that followed the trial, Harbor Point underwent a slow but determined transformation. The community, long divided by whispered scandals and guarded histories, united in a renewed call for transparency. Public meetings were convened, and local government officials introduced new protocols to ensure independent audits of all public records and property transactions. The once veiled dealings of the Whitmore family were brought into the light, prompting historians and civic leaders to re-examine the town's past and to acknowledge the dark chapters that had been hidden for generations. The legacy of Caroline Everett's sacrifice became a rallying cry for those who believed that every truth, no matter how painful, deserved to be told. Independent journalists and documentary filmmakers seized upon the story, producing in-depth reports and films that chronicled the investigation from the quiet halls of Silver Lake Lodge to the secret archives of the county clerk. Academic conferences were held where scholars debated the ethics of historical revisionism and the responsibilities of those who managed the public record. The case became a case study in the enduring struggle between those who wield power and those who dare to challenge the official narrative. For Detective Reyes, the investigation had become a lifelong mission. Even after the courtroom drama subsided, she continued to work on new cases with the same unwavering commitment to uncovering the hidden layers of truth. Late at night, as the cool mountain air whispered through the town and the lights of the lodge glowed softly against the dark sky, she would return to her modest office to review the recovered files, each one a testament to the cost of silence and the unyielding strength of those who strive for transparency. Though the unresolved mysteries, the true identity of Icarus, the full extent of the alterations, and the elusive influence of the Whitmore dynasty continued to linger, every new discovery was a step toward ensuring that history could never be rewritten for personal gain. Years later, Harbor Point had transformed from a town with a shadowed past into a community defined by its commitment to openness. The restored records, the independent oversight committees, and the spirited public debates all bore witness to a collective determination to honor the truth. Memorials were established in the town square, and a dedicated exhibit at the local museum chronicled the investigation, a permanent reminder that even the most deeply buried secrets would eventually be brought into the light. For Detective Tessa Reyes, whose name became synonymous with perseverance and integrity, the case was a defining chapter in her career. Each time she encountered a new discrepancy or received a cryptic tip from an unknown source, she remembered the sacrifices made by those who had risked everything to protect the public good. Her careful, methodical approach continued to inspire a new generation of investigators, and her legacy was one of relentless pursuit, a belief that no secret, however well concealed, could ever remain hidden forever. And so, as the soft light of dawn illuminated the rugged hills around Harbor Point and the gentle lapping of the lake mingled with the whispers of history, the legacy of the investigation endured. It was a story of resilience and the unyielding quest for truth, a narrative that transcended the confines of a single crime and became a beacon for a community determined to reclaim its past and safeguard its future. Every archived document, every public forum, every academic debate served as a quiet reminder that in the relentless struggle between power and transparency, the truth, no matter how elusive, will ultimately prevail. In the end, the case of Silver Lake Lodge and the death of Caroline Everett was not defined solely by legal victories or public indictments. It was etched into the soul of Harbor Point, a lasting reminder that the courage to uncover hidden truths is both a noble pursuit and a sacred duty. And as long as there are those who dare to question the official narrative, the spirit of accountability will continue to shine, guiding communities toward a future where every story is told in its full, unvarnished truth.